Hello and welcome back to MES Explores with Xavier and Alan, where as always we'll be looking at all manner of films from around the world. Now this week's episode carries a special explicit rating because we're reviewing Don't Look Up, and full disclosure, I have absolutely nothing nice to say about it, so you've been warned. Hello Alan!
Hello, Save, and of course, hello to our favourite fans. Welcome back to MES Explores. Before we launch our missiles to evade the end of humanity, remember, as always, our podcast are best enjoyed for those who have seen the film prior, as we do contain spoilers. As Save said, we are looking at Don't Look Up, which is a 2021 film directed by Adam McKay. I am really scared to see what he's about to say. Now, Don't Look Up stars Leonardo Dicaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Meryl Streep, Cate Blanchett, and Jonah Hill, just to name a few. So with this all-star cast lined up and ready to go, without further ado, Save, let's get straight into the film. What did you think?
I despised this film. I spent most of this film wanting to punch my screen. I swore at the television at least twice. I absolutely hated it with a burning passion. God. And I'm fueled by rage against it even now. And I couldn't care less if every single person responsible for its creation was brutally mauled by sharks in one of the hideous LA swimming pools. The pace of this film was insufferable. Leonardo Dicaprio was hopeless. This was possibly his worst performance ever. And as someone that I watched this film with said to me, if this is a state of comedy, you almost hope a comet hits Earth, or better yet, had hit during production so we were saved from watching this utter garbage. Now, how moronic are these stars to take on such a pathetic film? With the exception of Jonah Hill, of course, I just expect him to dwell in the toilet and produce this level of garbage. Now, this film was trying to be comedy, but as far as I'm concerned, it was anything but funny. This was possibly the most abysmal piece of shit I think I've ever seen. If it wasn't for the fact that I had to watch this insufferable turd for this review, I would have turned this film literally off after 6 minutes.
Alright, so, but what specifically did you hate about this film?
Everything. The acting was crap, the story was crap, the editing was crap, the music was rubbish, the casting was appalling. Everything about this film was just utter shit.
Holy shit. Okay. It's not rare for a film to cause disagreement or hostility between people like it has between us. But I think that's exactly what the film has done. Now, Adam McKay's environmental satire has definitely stirred the divisive pot amongst critics and fans alike. But even though, according to The Guardian, the film has been viewed by millions and is at present like Netflix's third most viewed film, however, the reactions from the critics has been predominantly negative. Now, a lot thought the narrative of low-level scientists discovering an asteroid heading for Earth as an undercooked, inept allegory for climate change, and I agree with that. Whereas other critics stated that, it was just lackluster, like you have said. Look, I think there are many in the climate change movement who have actually celebrated the film, and the general audience criticisms have been mainly positive.
Yeah, but I just feel like this completely undermines the credibility of the likes of Dicaprio, who've actually tried to build themselves up in the environmental arena. This just came across like a bunch of sanctimonious Hollywood elites jerking themselves off, and I've absolutely zero patience for this level of self-indulgent crap.
But what was self-indulgent about this film? Because, look, I understand that Leonardo DiCaprio is a big climate advocate, and even in his Oscar speech, he did give mention to how important climate change was when he won a Best Actor for The Revenant.
Yeah, absolutely, but I think this is the thing, and that's what I'm saying. He's tried to build himself up in the environmental arena, and kudos to him for that. I do not have an issue with people actively trying to do something for that. My problem is that, quite aside from the fact that we know most of these people to be quite pious and sanctimonious when it does come to issues of sort of this caliber, what we got here was a film that, as far as I'm concerned, actively worked against that. It was almost like them saying, look, you didn't listen to us, so we're going to crack the shits and just make a mockery out of it. And that's what bothered me, because this could have been so much better, it could have been so much more poignant, and it could have been delivered in a far more captivating way. If you're going for comedy, that's fine. And if you're going for dark comedy or, parody, that's fine. But do it properly. This wasn't done properly. This was a total swing and a miss as far as I'm concerned.
Right. But climate change is a tough subject for any film, let alone when you're doing a satire. But Don't Look Up is admittedly a disaster satire, right? And it also tries to be a lot of things at the same time. So I can understand your gripes here. Initially, it's a general entertainment piece from the director from, I guess, the pop culture classic Anchorman, and he's done other movies as well that we all know. But it's also the wails and shrieks of caution regarding climate change, and I guess finally, it's an allegory of how distracted and unattached we are as a society. These elusive reasons have made the film significantly polarizing. And I think one thing I've noticed is that the criticism has emphasized the trouble of portraying a crucial message through the use of humor. Now, Kevin Townsend from The Atlantic poignantly questions that, has political satire lost its power, or has reality become so absurd that it's now beyond parody?
I think it was more than this, though. The entire film had an air of boring arrogance about it. And, as far as I'm concerned, this director's a total wanker, and I don't like most of his work anyway. But I don't think the issue here is whether satire has lost its power. I think more to the point is that this was just a generally shit film with utterly dismal execution. Now, a bad workman blames his tools, and a shithouse director produces shit. That's not the audience's fault or an interpretation thing, or whether a particular stylistic form has gone out of vogue. But for argument's sake, if parody had gone out of vogue, then the director's still an idiot for not noticing and still trying to produce something in that vein. So, I don't think political satire has necessarily lost its power, or that humanity or society in general has become somewhat removed and, I guess, indifferent to it. I think this was just a bad film that didn't get across the line.
All right. For me to play devil's advocate here, let's take a current look at our situation now. We've been told repeatedly about the threats of climate change. We are physically feeling the environments around us change, but yet Brazil's President Bolsonaro continues to cut down the rainforest beyond or reaching up to a critical point where the changes are about to be irreversible, and factories are still producing so much CO2 to cater for our materialistic lifestyles that it's almost like they're putting profits over our children's futures. So what was wrong with Adam's sort of comical approach to this film? It's almost like he's saying that we're presented with the truth, but yet we just choose to ignore it because our lives are more important, or our current lives are more important.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But by the same token, if you're going to take such a pot shot at society in general, at large around the world with a film of this caliber or ilk, then you would argue that by the same token, the film should be attempting to motivate us into some course of action, and that the film is just a different angle at which it's trying to get us to be motivated. But this film didn't motivate me to do anything.
It didn't?
No, not at all.
Right. So, director Adam McKay said in an interview that he was inspired to write the movie by his escalating fears about the climate crisis. And I believe after working on the project, the pandemic occurred. And Adam stated that a comedy about even the most obvious of threats is failing to stir collective action became suddenly more relevant. And even though the closed-minded leaders of the film are incapable of making decisions against an apparent existential danger, it makes one wonder how similar is the narrative to our current geopolitical climate, and will the message derived from the film make a difference? And if not, why? Is it because that we're guilty of the parody that McKay projects? Because even when we look at our current situation, our world leaders have taken multiple different approaches to deal with this pandemic crisis. China's locked down its citizens done hard lockdowns of its citizens for like a couple of weeks straight. Other people have different rules, different vaccine distributions. Like there's no homogenous approach to our stewards of government.
No, but I think a lot of that stems from the fact that people have different social and societal beliefs. And, the value of a human life in one regard might be different to that in another regard. And equally so, the value of a wild animal for some people is more important to that of the life of a human. Now, shit films are never going to motivate the masses to act. And if you want to make an effective statement, make a better film. Or alternatively, if you want to do something meaningful for the world, answer me this. Were the stars of this film paid? Now, the answer is, of course, yes. They were paid tens and tens of millions of dollars. Now, this film is complicit for the same capitalistic horseshit it argues against. Spend the $75 million planting trees or killing millions of people, or both ideally, but don't tell me getting millions of people to sit on their asses watching this crap, burning fuel to power their televisions made from minerals dug out of lowland gorillas' homelands, is somehow going to save the world. I mean, with that attitude, you can just fuck right off.
Fucking hell. Okay, let me put it to you another way. So, that's like saying movies about the oppressed or the suppressed, and like an example on top of my head is maybe the African American situation in America, where they make films about the oppressed in the past and it gives historical context, but and actors are paid, but it's almost like saying, well, we should probably, these actors should be giving up their paydays, or studios should be giving that money up for victims as reparation. I think films also have to be looked through the lens of an entertainment value, and also for us to extrapolate the actual deeper meanings behind these films.
Yeah, but I think, there's still two different sides of this here. If you want to talk about, sort of racial equity and stuff in films, there have been cases where, a lot of those films' proceeds and revenue and, gross income of them has then been directed towards projects to actually help disadvantaged groups and whatnot. So, that to some extent does happen. And yes, to some extent, some films inevitably give their proceeds to actually help the environment in one way or another, whether that's, a community environmental program or some such thing. But the problem I have is that if you do a historical film about, for instance, Black Americans and sort of the injustices they faced 100 years ago or whatever it may be, that's fine. But that film isn't trying to beat society over the head at large now for doing the very things that are causing this so-called downfall. If you want to have a film about the inaction that people take towards the environment, having them sit around watching a movie is never going to fix that. A film about social injustice and making people aware of what happened in the past so they actually have an opportunity to not do that in the future or to understand that history, I think is very different. And for that reason, I would say a film made by the likes of Attenborough, which actually gives us that scientific, historical background, whether it be evolution or sort of the data that we can see through climate change and whatnot, that provides more of that sort of factual-based lens, not a film that just smacks us over the head and goes, oh, aren't you all a bunch of terrible idiots?
Right. So usually we have liberal commentators hating on a film when the critics have loved it, right? But in this case, it's the opposite. The critics hate the film, and the liberals are having a go at them for missing the point. Now, in my opinion, one of the most significant relationships a film has with its viewer is how it communicates, including the nuances of the film. Now, a film that makes you think as you leave its presence, I guess, has performed its job. Now, in this particular case, even though the medium the film chose was satirical, I think it still made you ponder on its message as you left. And I can sure feel like I did, because it's almost like I thought to myself, holy shit, how would I react in this particular situation, Or how are my actions of lack of recycling or being less conscious about the environment around us at this present stage is affecting the future of our generations?
Yeah, see, look, I didn't find that. Now, that's not to say I didn't understand what this film was going for. I got its messages, I got its nuance, I knew what it was out to get. But to be honest, all this film made me want to do was just forget it. And as soon as we were done recording this episode, I planned to delete it from my own memory. Such was the level of insufferability I actually experienced and sort of almost personal anguish that I felt towards this film as I was watching it. It was just absolutely awful. And if I am the sort of person that understands what it was going for, I'm also the sort of person that is very much against, everything from, throwing your garbage on the street to wiping out lowland gorilla habitats to, overfishing the ocean for bloody shark fin and all that sort of garbage. If it pisses someone like me off so much, and I'm the very sort of person who should feel annoyed by the fact that we're not doing enough, that we do just seem to be sitting on our hands, and the film that comes along to try and promote my exacerbation exacerbates me more and makes me hate it and ambivalent against it, then that film, as far as I'm concerned, has backfired massively.
Right. Okay. Now, McKay mentions the first two acts of the film were supposed to be engaging, and the final act was meant to drill a more prominent message. But after watching the film, you feel the inverse is true. The first two acts cause more distress as you watch the leaders of the free world who are unable to make decisive decisions and leverage their positions to benefit their own self-interest. Now, the final act actually ends up being more emotional and sentimental. It becomes more about an existential acceptance. Now, there is an element of the film that propagates it. We're too focused on our own existence to be concerned with, our worldly issues. How many times do we see people change their profile pictures on their social media accounts to rally for the cause of the day, and then a few weeks later forget about, what the movement actually meant or how that movement's going? It's all about the hype. It's all about the now. So have we all as a species evolved beyond a point of collective action? Do we even care? And I guess there are two ways that we can sort of see this film. As a film by itself, or as a meta-critique for highlighting the muffled primal screams of our future existence.
Look, I don't think either of those elements could be argued that we've actually evolved in any way. I think we've gone quite the opposite way. And I think social media, by and large, notwithstanding the way this film tried to beat us over the head with it, is probably one of the worst things to have ever happened to humanity and society on the whole.
Yeah.
If I had my way, I think I'd go the Chinese model and shut down social media by and large for the population. But, it's not up to me. But for me,
Thank God it's not.
the world might be a better place. I remember it 15 years ago. Anyway, for me, it wasn't distressing to watch the leaders of this so-called free world because of inaction. It was agonizing to me because I had to suffer through some of the worst acting and character portrayal any of these people have ever forced upon us on screen. And I guess that neatly brings us to acting.
It does indeed.
Dare you wade into that?
Oh, God. So, look, Meryl Streep, man. If I was ever asked in a job interview who would play you in a movie, I would automatically, without hesitation, say Meryl Streep. Because what can't she fucking do?
This, apparently.
No. So there's an actual scene, when Leonardo and Jennifer Lawrence actually go into her office for the first time and she's on a phone call. Now, I've actually seen a behind the scenes footage from this actual take where she improvised about 20 or 25 different lines, all different, all unique, all funny. Well, I guess that's, a perspective. And the director was just astounded that, she was able to do this. I think she was underutilized in the film because, maybe that's just the way her character was written. But what did you think?
Look, to be fair, I also love Meryl Streep. I think she is a fantastic actress, so I'm not going to take anything away from her for that. However, in this film, yes, you could argue perhaps she was underutilized, although I think it probably came from a creative issue and her character was just a crap character. Now, given Meryl usually does multiple titles a year and last year only had this garbage to her name, I can only assume she was either desperate for a paycheck or she was desperate to remain on screen and somehow remain relevant. Because I cannot understand why someone of her ilk and caliber would take on such a crap project.
But there was so many stars in this film.
There was so many stars in this film, but it felt almost like one of those Adam Sandler films where you just got all these buddies together and went, let's make a crap film together, but it'll be fun because we make it as a group of friends. That's what this felt like. And it reminded me a bit of that god-awful film called, I think, The End of the World or This Is the End or whatever.
I actually like that film.
I think also was another Jonah Hill piece of garbage, but it was the same thing. It felt like a bunch of kids got together and went, let's make a crap movie together. And so they just went along with it because their friends did.
To be completely honest, I'm a big fan of that film, The End of the World.
God.
I think, as much as that is a stoner film, and I probably wasn't high when I was watching that film, but, I really did enjoy, that film. Especially when like the devil or a demon fucks Jonah Hill in one of the scenes. But moving on, let's talk about big star Leonardo. Man, I agree he was underutilized again in this film, but there are elements where he comes to life, right? That scene in the bathroom where he's battling an ulcer and, so he gets stressed so much that, his ulcers play up or his stomach produces so many juices that exacerbates his condition. It was just, it was classic Leonardo.
See, I had a real trouble with Leonardo Dicaprio in this film. I thought he was hopeless. Now, as I said earlier, I'm pretty sure this is one of his worst performances ever. My biggest gripe with this, though, was the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio comes across as an intelligent person in real life. And I felt like he was trying to come across as an awkward, somewhat dim-witted yet intelligent person in this film. Yeah. And it didn't work for me. I did not find him a believable character until somewhere around sort of halfway in the film where they'd magically done away with his bullshit awkwardness on screen and suddenly he was capable of having a conversation and an affair and all this sort of crap, which actually seems a lot more like Leonardo DiCaprio in reality. That's where his character felt a bit more Wolf of Wall Street, believable. His anger and angst felt genuine, and they'd just taken away this crappy veneer that he couldn't really pull off. So I was very unhappy with his performance in this. And further to that, I did not find him to be a believable father. Now, I don't know if that's because he doesn't look old enough or because the two sons, for God knows what reason, they cast people both with beards and they just seem too close to his age. Either way, I just thought, did you inherit two 28-year-olds when you were 22? Like, it didn't work.
No, look, I don't think this was his worst performance. I think it was probably his worst script that he's chosen for him as an actor because it doesn't showcase his full range of capabilities. So I think that's a limiting choice. But that's one of those things where you have to do the film to figure out if it's a good script or not. It's one of those things you can't really predict 100% prior to committing.
I feel like if you are the caliber of actors of the people in this film, you can read a script and you know what the film's going to be like.
But that's the thing, they've all chosen to do it. So maybe we're looking at it in a different perspective or a lens.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the pious arrogance of the collective whole.
All right, Jennifer Lawrence, mate. She's a babe in some other films. In this one, she's erratic. She's popping some pills. She's just, she's manic. It felt over the top. I didn't sort of engage with her as I thought I would.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence, yawn. I generally find her pretty ho-hum and boring. I feel like Jennifer Lawrence is pretty much always Jennifer Lawrence or some version of herself. She's kind of got that Nicole Kidman issue. We kind of like her for some reason, but she's actually really crap at her job.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm not gonna stick on that one because I don't want Jennifer's lawyers coming after us, say. But on that note, I'm gonna move to Jonah Hill. Man,
Jonah Hill could go fuck himself.
No, but he played classic Jonah, right? This was there was some very arrogant comedy behind his character, and I thought it was funny. He was.
But this is a problem. I've never ever seen this dickhead in anything. Like, I just cannot tolerate this shithead of a guy. He never plays anything different. He's literally playing the same character and kind of prick in this as he was in Forgetting Sarah Marshall. He's a hacker who just happens to have the right friends. That means he keeps popping up in movies.
No, absolutely not. We've seen him in The Wolf of Wall Street. We've seen him in Moneyball.
He still plays a similar character.
No, he doesn't. He plays a more intelligent, investment banker role, like not one of those like stone drug, like comedy types. And we've seen him in Moneyball with Brad Pitt, where he's like an analyst. So he's capable.
But it's never believable because he still comes across like the retard in the room.
No.
I cannot take him seriously as a character that has a brain. Because I'm not convinced Jonah Hill has a brain. So he can't portray it on screen. Because he's not that good of an actor. He can't pretend to have something he doesn't have.
For fuck's sake. So, like I said, we don't have the money to fight these legal battles. So with that said, we're going to go on to cinematography later on. Actually, you know what? I'm going to actually start with this one.
Go for it.
Look, I think the editor that worked on this film told McKay that, this was one of the most difficult movies that he sort of edited. And one of the challenges I assume they would have faced is the tone. It's constantly changing throughout the acts of the film. As we've discussed before, it changes from despair to absurdity and then to pragmatism. It seems like an epic task to try and contain everything, especially when you have such a wide cast and a narrative with varying plot twists continually occurring. So I can see why there would have been a struggle with the editing, but the final scenes in the film actually really worked for me, leaving behind the comical aspects, and they hone in more on the character-centered, about one last moment on Earth. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay, look, that... I'm not going to say the last scene, because the last scene, that 22,000 years later, don't get me started on that.
Oh, yes.
But
that was pretty fucking shit.
That scene where they're sort of all having that final meal on Earth. Yeah, okay, it was a nice moment. It was probably the only half-competent scene in the entire film. And I think it's because it was the only coherent one, and that's why it was able to be edited in such a way that made sense. However, I despised everything else about the editing in this film. I thought it was so shoddy. However, most of that, as far as I'm concerned, comes down to poor directorial choices from McKay, because he had a terrible vision of what it should have been to begin with. This edit felt every bit as confused as it was disruptive. McKay isn't clever. He's an idiot thinking that his stylistic choices were somehow edgy, new, or creative, but it was taxing and tedious. The stupid little cuts of social media and nature just bombing the screen at intervals, it lacked subtlety and it lacked finesse, and that was what made the whole film come across as messy, unguided, disjointed, and lacking true vision. And I'm not surprised yet it had a very difficult job making some semblance of sense out of this film, because the director himself clearly didn't really have that clarity. And so I think that really translated to the difficulties that others experienced in this film, whether it's acting, shooting, editing, and ultimately the confused mess we got as an end result.
Okay. Let's wrap this film up, say, before the lawyers bloody knock on our doors.
Look, go for it.
Yeah, look, I think climate change is a tough subject for any film, let alone a satire. Now, this film admittedly is a disaster satire, but it also tries to do a lot of things at the same time. Initially, it's just a general entertainment piece. It's also got the wails and shrieks of caution, regarding the climate change. And finally, it's an allegory for how distracted and unattached we are as a society. These are all elusive reasons that have made the film significantly polarizing, especially between you and I. But I'm going to give this film a 6 out of 10.
Wow.
Or maybe even a 5.5 out of 10. Between a 5.5 and a 6.
Okay, well, you're not going to like what I give it. But anyway.
I'm waiting for the minus.
Well, yeah. But anyway, we'll come to that. Look, in one foul swoop, for me, this film normalised ambivalence and makes a mockery out of those who have fought to do good for generations. It was just an Armageddon piss take with a thinly veiled attempt to run a different narrative through it, and it was about as effective as Spaceballs was for Star Wars. Just forgettable rubbish. Now, the editing in this film, as I said, was absolutely awful. The acting genuinely pathetic, and the ending, 22,000 years later, fuck you and fuck this shit film, okay? Now, this film was just so bad, both my dogs immediately went outside to eat copious amounts of grass, and I was inclined to join them just so I could be sick too. So I'm actually going to give this film a negative 10 out of 10.
Wow, I think that's the lowest score you've actually given a film till date. I really hope that these actors and the director can win you back in the future. But with that said, guys, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. This is our first explicit content, so I hope you do like it. We'll see you all next week.
See you later, folks.